Hi guys, Keith Arkenberg Farms. It's now the third week in July and my tomatoes here are just going nuts right now. I have finally found a new way to trellis my tomatoes that I came up with myself, and it really is great in preventing sun scald. So let me show you. But first, don't forget to head over to arkenbergfarms.com. Scroll down the bottom, tab down there, digital tools and training. Got a bunch of cool stuff down there, spreadsheets and a bunch of other things. We also have our side openers for sale for the sides of your greenhouse like this one, and the door actuators that'll actually open and close a door or a vent to keep your greenhouse cool in the winter. This is a new trellis system I came up with. So you can see there ain't really much to it. It's a bunch of baling twine, some T-post, and I did a video about a month or so ago about trellising and a possible new trellis. I really didn't want to go into it and talk about it till I actually knew that it's going to work. And so far it is working beautifully. And let me show you why and kind of tell you the issues we've been having and why I actually came up with this and invented this design here. Most of your tomatoes are grown using a single line like this. Goes up to a trellis line, and we have tomahawks there. Goes down, you twist your tomato plant around it, kind of like this one right here behind me. Break all the suckers off and then trellis it to the top. It's referred to as a lean and lower method. Works really good for cherry tomatoes, and I know a lot of greenhouse growers that also have great luck on it for their slicers and heirlooms. For me, I never ever have. Every time I've tried to do this method, I end up with really bad shoulder burn and sun scald on the top and sides of my tomatoes, which makes them basically unmarketable. The next method we tried, which I don't have an example out here this year because I'm doing my other experiment right on the other side here, which is the Florida weave, where you drive a bunch of T-posts in the ground, plant your tomatoes in between, and then you literally weave a string through them, plant to plant, all the way down the row, and then you come back the other direction. So you're essentially trapping them inside of 2 layers of string. You do that about every 6 to 8 inches or so. Works great, holds the tomato plants up. They get a little unruly when they get to the top, but I was still getting the horrible sun scald on all the tomatoes, which led me back to this design. So I remember back when I was a home gardener, we always used tomato cages. I gotta drop underneath this string line real quick. And I never had any of those issues. Never trimmed the suckers, never trimmed the leaves, nothing. I always had great tomatoes in abundance all season. That's where this design really came from. I'm gonna deem it the Arkenberg Trellis because that's who I am and I came up with it. Very similar to a box trellis, but with some very distinct differences. I actually did a video a couple months back, maybe a month or two ago. So we're gonna jump over to that and I'll actually show you what it looks like, and then we'll go from there. I went through and started building this trellis. So what I did, I saw something, can't remember who it was now, somewhere on YouTube, and I flat out hate doing Florida weave. I think it's a waste of time, and by the time I get to doing it, they've grown too big, and then I'm just smushing stuff together. And we have such great light intensity, literally from horizon to horizon. That little tree line back there is all that blocks us from flat. So all my slicer tomatoes get shoulder burned real bad. So I'm trying to go back to basically a caging type method, and that's where this idea kind of came in, is I'm trying to make a cage out of a trellis. I went through, tied off to one end, and made 2 full loops. So there should be 4 pieces of line here. And then at each one of the T-posts, I actually went through and just tied it off there and then tied it off there. I did that so it stays sturdy on the T-post when it starts weighing on it. And I've got 4 lines, so that should be good. The biggest problem I'm seeing is that there is nothing to prevent this plant from moving back and forth. So if there's nothing to prevent it moving back and forth, what's to keep it from falling over this way or this way? I don't know. I'm thinking maybe on this next one I do like a diagonal from here, this post, back to that post, and that might at least put some more stuff in the middle to kind of guide them. I really don't know. It's the first time I've ever tried to do this. The other part I did is I put a line across the top, so when they start getting weight on, it's not going to want to splay the post apart. They'll stay. The end post I did put, I don't know, just a little bit of an angle back, so once I tension on them, they'll start to pull back in. No guide wires. Did these posts every 10 foot. Again, I have no clue if this is going to work. I really hope it does, because if it does, this is so much easier, because I don't have to wait on the tomatoes. When I have free time, I can put another line, another line, another line, as long as I'm staying somewhat ahead of them. The way I'm kind of thinking of it, most tomato cages are about 6 to 8 inches in between rings. So I'm going to put a line about every 6 to 8 inches, probably lean it towards 6. So as you can see, it's actually a very, very simple A-frame design. Actually a V design, upside down A, where I brought the T-posts up and then I looped string around them to keep them from actually moving out. I spaced all my T-posts on 10 foot on centers. My tomato plants are spaced at 2 foot on center. And I'm really finding that this really, really mimics the single tomato cages, but they're all in one combined trellis. So I only have to set it up once, easy to tear down. I just got to dry some T-posts, take them back out, get rid of the line. But other than that, it is working great. As you can see, they are getting a little unruly now. One of the things you have to worry about is it'll shoot the suckers, and you've got to take those and actually weave them back in. I've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 lines on this. I ran the line down, all the way down, all the way back, all the way down, all the way back. So there's actually 4 sets of lines in here that I tied off on the ends of each of these T-posts. The 2 at each end, I actually drove them in. They're at an angle this way, but they're also facing back this way. So when they start to take a load and really tension, it's pulling them back into there. And that really just helps, because if they're upright, they keep going. But if I put them at an angle to begin with, they start to move up. That's one of the issues that I've had with this method, is because of that happening, that they're starting to get a little unruly. I did have to go through, and on this, you really can't see here in the middle, they were really starting to splay out real bad in the center because this top line was getting a little slack. What I did is I just ran a line in between them. Now I think if I space these at 6 foot or 8 foot, I wouldn't have that problem. The other issue I had, because the spacing is larger, because they're on 10 foot, is I've got these occasional guide wires, like the one I had to duck underneath, holding them back so they're not falling into me because my cherry tomatoes are behind me. But I mean, all in all, so far, I'm getting really, really good slicer tomatoes on it. No damage whatsoever. That one's, it's already blushed. It'll be fine to ripen up. But I'm getting a lot of good tomatoes off this, and that is where I'm super excited about. The biggest issue I'm having at this point is these are 5.5 foot T-posts. I'm 6 foot tall. My tomato plants are currently almost 6 feet tall. So I've already outgrown the trellis. I do have trellis guidelines up here, which I might have to do something and kind of, I don't know, make another kind of support that runs through. If I used larger T-posts, like if I used an 8-footer, this would not be an issue at all. It's working great, like I said. The main disadvantages I'm having is it's very hard to actually see into the jungle. But this is also very similar to the Florida weave method. The tomatoes are just pretty much everywhere, so you've really got to dig in there anyways. But I'm getting good, marketable, sellable tomatoes instead of like over 70% of them having shoulder burns. And I tried different varieties to alleviate this that were supposed to be super resistant to shoulder burn. Guess what? They still got shoulder burn. Very, very easy method. I mean, there's really nothing to it. Here is one of the lines right here. So they're both at an angle going down, meeting at the center. And then this right here keeps it from coming out any further. So it's supporting here. And then, like I said, these are a bunch of paste tomatoes here in the beginning, or the end here. Where it really started to push, I had to grab these, bring them together and tie them off just to kind of contain them because they are getting a little bit loose. The line does that over time anyways. So I'm going to take you on an overhead here, kind of fly you over, fly you in a couple spots, and show you how I'm getting all these beautiful tomatoes. Like I said, down here are all my determinate. They're just a bunch of paste tomatoes. I'll use them for salsa and sauces and things like that. I also bunch them up and sell them as pints. Here you can really see the construction and what it looks like now, where I've got the lines and they're tied off on each point on both sides of it because I just run continuous loops around the outside, then tie these off to secure it. My cross tie, that works great there. It's one of the disadvantages that you can really see how far out of line it's pushing. They really started to move over. Not a big deal on this side because I'm actually on the far end. And then I got to figure out what to do now that I've outgrown the trellis. But yeah, I mean, all in all, these babies are looking really nice. And I've got really heavy fruit set all throughout this area in here. Have had a little bit of issue with the corn earworms coming in. Got a lot of beneficial little house wrens around here that really take care of the caterpillar problem for me. So I have not found any giant hornworms yet. I found one on the cherries, but I do know that there are some corn earworms in here. There's another beautiful cluster right there. I just harvested this yesterday, so there's nothing really super ripe in here right now. But yeah, I mean, they're looking great, and I've got a lot of fruit setting in them. And the great thing is that they're all sellable and marketable because they are not damaged like they have been in years past. The next part is I really want to hear from everybody out there of what are your ideas to do now that I have exceeded the top of my T-posts. Like I said, I do have guide wires up there. I can drop strings, make another cage. That sounds complicated, big old pain. Or it's already July. Do I just go through and top them like I did with the Florida weave method and let them contain themselves? Or just fall over and just create more mass into the cage itself? Like I said, this is an experiment. It's a very, very good experiment. It is the Arkenberg Trellis. I want you to share that with everybody. Let them know, because this is really the way that I'm going to grow all my slicer tomatoes in my greenhouse now. This is by far, hands down, the best way. Very minimal material in it. I got baling twine, T-post, and that's it. Tomato cages are expensive. Concrete wire is expensive. All the other things out there were way too expensive. I happen to have these guys laying around. So it really worked out great. For me, there was a no cost to do it. But I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 T-posts in this whole thing. So you cannot compete with 2 foot on center. There's got to be 25 tomato plants in here roughly, maybe 30 to get 25 cages. There's no way. This is hands down way better. I believe it'll work in the field great too. We've also had really, really big windstorms come through that blew out of the north, which is behind me, and the open end of the greenhouse from the northwest as well. This has stood up great. I believe it'd do great in the field too. Of course, in the field, you also run into the risk of blight from the soil wash up from the rains. But if you got landscape fabric on both sides, that'll help too. I did plant them straight down the middle, no fabric, and then I ran my pieces of landscape fabric up to the bases of the plants to get the ground covered to keep the weeds down. Works great. It's all on drip irrigation as well. So, I want to hear your thoughts. Let me know what you think, and then spread the word, because this is awesome. I'm digging it. I'm loving it. I think this is a success, and this is really how you should be doing your tomatoes in a greenhouse or in the field. It's just so economical and makes so much sense. As always, hope y'all like what you saw here today. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank y'all. Have a good day.